Welcome back, everyone. And Cem, welcome. I'm so glad you could join us today and taking the time for us. Let's learn a bit about ColdFire Games and you today. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background as one of the co-founders? How did ColdFire come to existence?
Yeah, so my name is Aslan. I founded ColdFire Games 4 to 5 years ago. So a little bit over me. So I got my first touch with computers and games actually back in the 80s as I was 9. I think it was the Commodore C64, my first computer that I had. And from that point, actually, I was sure that I want to make something with computers in the future. So I just studied computer science. Directly after studying, I worked on gaming companies, funnily only mobile. So also with ColdFire Games, as we just founded it, it was clear that we want to stick on mobile. So back then it was just two guys of us. So it was me as coder and a friend of me that was the artist. And the idea of having ColdFire Games was, since I worked in bigger companies before, to have a smaller, more flexible and also more cozy company and just create the games that you want to do. Well, during the time, we are now grown to having being 8 people and still focusing on mobile games.
Cool. And what kind of games did you set out to build? What genres were interesting for you as a team?
So we are actually all sci-fi fans. So we started with space shooter, and iterated just on that. However, we got actually very passionate about idle games that are actually not more that you are playing actively or controlling your your spaceship. It's more about the managing part on that, on building things up, building your empire. And so we are also now doing or just sticking on idle games. However, we are just trying out different settings, like having the space shooter, having now actually the latest game from us is having a more casino theme, and then a little bit more casual. So we're trying things out.
Okay, so it's mostly games that continue even when you sort of drop off playing it.
Yeah, sure. That's an important part of idle games. So also, if you just close the game and doing something else, it still simulates what's happening in the game world, and so you can just come back and just start directly from there off, take the money that you've earned in the time and just invest it for anything else, and to just grow up your computer world.
Yeah, and for anyone watching who's not familiar with your titles, what's been ColdFire Games' most successful game to date? And did that come as a surprise at all?
The latest game that we have is Idle Casino Manager. So the setting is that you are starting up with a very small casino and want to build your big casino empire in there. So you're just having to make sure that the players that are in the game or your customers in the game are happy, coming again. You have to add new games but we can play in your casino. You have to make sure that there's enough space, you have enough parking slots in there. Also then move to new buildings, get higher buildings, get more customers and all the stuff and all the iteration in that. It was kind of, well, actually we are having out now 4 games. So we iterated all over the games and we're able to just push every game a little bit better than the one before. We were kind of impressed of it on how, since beforehand we just did space games, so it was a science fiction genre, and we are now try to go to be a bit more open and more casual, and that actually worked really good.
Cool. And a successful game usually means one that has a global scale, which usually means more demand on your infrastructure. What were some of the issues you had at that time? So I don't know, thinking about when you were still on-prem.
Yeah, so the thing is, as we've now released for games till now, we always changed and had a big learning curve from that. So on the first game that we just had the default on-prem setup, I would say. So you just have your databases in there being scalable, being fault tolerant. You have your front-end servers, you have the messaging all the way in between. And it's actually like, okay, you're not having the machine like in your own data center, but it's just in the cloud in there. Especially for mobile games, it's really easy to be available worldwide. So you just push it in the app stores, and then you are immediately available at a huge scale. Which actually took me some sleepless nights in the beginning, because you can get a platform feature from Apple or from Google. We are not announcing it, and you just see it like just getting alerts from your servers that we are on complete capacity, and just have some impact. So if you just start a game and you're just driving up organic traffic, it's something like, okay, you're getting 1,000, 2,000 installs in there, and having also not a best feature, but a really low feature that just can ramp up your installs per day to 60,000, which actually means that, okay, you're losing money and customers because we are not able to connect to your servers. So you're just pushing machines on your stack in there. On the other way, after the traffic stops, or if the traffic is just going up and down, you are just having too much of capacity there that is not used, but we actually had in the beginning a lot. So this was the main problem that I had. So it's just to not being able to scale in a timely fashion, and actually also have to spend my time with scaling and not creating games. And so we just switched from that to the complete serverless stack. So we are actually now using only managed services. That means our database is just running on DynamoDB. Frontend is actually all done with API gateway and lambdas. And actually, since then, back then, I'm just sleeping really well because I did not get the alarms at night. And actually, I'm also not now concerning about CCUs or something like that, or if we are getting features, if we do any marketing, and I have to make sure that servers are scaled up at the right time, because everything is done just automatically.
Cool. Good to hear. I can imagine that, let's say back in the days, that such a success could have mixed feelings, right? Both being a successful games and sleepless nights from run correctly. So good to hear that you sleep well nowadays. So you choose AWS as your cloud provider. What were some of the requirements you had to be able to run your game workloads more efficiently?
So well, actually, the thing was just so the basic setup was just, okay, I need a database and I need the front-end service where the code is running in there. The good things about AWS is actually that I'm just focusing now on the business logic and not like back then on how the architecture has to be. Since with Lambda, you just have to make sure that the code is that code that you want to run. So you just focus on the business logic. Also for DynamoDB, okay, you are thinking about on how to put data in there and how to structure it, but actually that's it. So you do not have to make sure how's communication, how much data have you to make sure, how partitioning and all the stuff. So that was kind of easing and making the game development more smooth, since we are just concentrating on the game and not on that overall stuff that you just need to do also.
Yeah, good to hear. And how did you prepare for that migration from on-prem to cloud? Did you have some services in mind when you started? You already touched upon DynamoDB, Lambda, of course, but how did you do the preparation?
The initial idea was just to save time for me and having all the loads just running smoothly. So actually there was no plan on that. So we just had that our old stack running in there, and I just thought that has to be some way easier, and so we just started on that. So we usually just started with trying a little bit out of having our old stack split up in more microservices, just having them in the Lambda in there, and just look for how that works and how smoothly that runs, how many it will maybe cost. So to just get a tip on that. So we tested by that. We had no really plan, so we just gone through. Since the good thing about being a small company is that you can just do things directly and do not have to plan it as it was on the companies before I worked before. So that was actually right smooth. And one thing that I just realized back then was, having that all that auto scaling automatically activated in that just also reduced our costs, since we are not having servers just running there and just idling, because we need to make sure that there is enough capacity if we need it. However, as it usually is, you cannot plan that in a really good manner where we just can say, okay, today at night at 8, I just get the traffic, or some campaigns are running, so you have to make sure it's getting there. So that was actually quite impressive, and I just get quite fascinated about that. And after seeing that, I just completely moved everything within 2 weeks. So because that got our first priority, because it was just that smoother than before. It was just time or worth all the time that we just spent to migrating it.
Yeah, and if we talk about your backend architecture, what other services are you using besides Lambda and API Gateway and DynamoDB?
So that's actually the core game server stack. I would say that is the stack that is connected with the clients. Backend, however, as a company, as a gaming company especially, it's not just the game service, because you have other services running in, say, BI tracking. Since you want to know if the games are performing well, anything else. So we are also using the RDS service to have a SQL relational database running for doing all, or storing actually all the BI stuff. We are actually using the SQS message service, since I wanted to decouple the core game services and the BI infrastructure, since if something is not going on the BI, we have to make sure that the game services is running, since this is the part where the customer is facing. And if we have an outage there, customers are just seeing it, and we just wanted to decouple that. Let me think about it. So, and we are actually using also S3 and also a lot of microservices, also the Fargate cluster, to just have different workloads that we are having, like building clients, making sure that we internally and all our testers have access to that, having also some static sites hosted on S3.
Yeah. So you use serverless quite extensively, and you have got different workloads. You touched a bit on cost already, but what are the benefits that have come with using the whole serverless stack? And maybe also thinking about having 3 different games, maybe you have some synergy amongst the backends. Anything that you could share around that?
Yeah, so actually, when we start talking about costs and what the benefits are, that's on the one part, it's just the pure hardware cost that you have, like not having servers running there without just idling because you don't need it. But another also important part, especially if you're a small company like we are, is that you also need someone to maintain the servers, because on the on-prem side you have all this thing like, okay, having all the patching days, make sure that every machine is running on the highest patch level, everything is working smooth, having planned outages for that. This just you can just not think about it now with the serverless. So I'm actually also saving a lot of human resource time to have that infrastructure running in there. Another part is also, as a small company, being able to manage free games at the same time, is that you have to reuse a lot of technology code just to make sure that you can concentrate really on the important things of the new games and not all of the infrastructure part in that. And this is also something that we can really profit from AWS, since actually all our games are running the same server code, since it's just microservices that all of the games are using. And the interesting part is also, since we are not having heavily multiplayer games, so it's just the single player games. However, we rely on an infrastructure that is somewhere in the cloud. Since it's just not about having a safe game backup and something like that. So just to make sure that users are not losing their progress if something's happening to their phone or anything like that. It's also important to have a customer service that is able to investigate in problems, and worst case scenario for example is if something with the in-app purchase goes wrong. So user pays it, but still not gets it. So you have to make also sure that you have a back channel from the cloud or from your support service to the game where you can just fix things. And this is also one important thing. So to be on that, so we are just using a lot of microservices that are in there. Also, a good feature that we use is having multiple organizations in AWS. So every game has its own organization. This is also very important to just make sure that each game server and all the services are separated by it. So developer is not accidentally changing something on the wrong system. If everything is, because otherwise we just have the problem. If everything is just running on one machine, it gets just problems.
Yeah. So from, let's say, total cost of ownership or TCO perspective, you see 3 benefits in the actual infrastructure costs and the fact that you don't need a lot of resources just to have your infrastructure ready. So let's say manpower, especially with a short team, and you're even able to share investments from a shared platform amongst, let's say, the 3 games you have and probably the new games you will develop in the future as well.
Yeah, that's actually that's actually the point for us. So since the first migration, actually all our games are running on some parts of the first implementation from our serverless infrastructure that yet we are just adding more microservices to it for anything else that we have, like messaging or something like that, or maybe adding some kind of chat feature in there. But the basic stuff is still the one from the first games, and it's just running really smooth.
Well, I can imagine it's the other way around as well. So all your new games benefit from the investment you already made, but any new things you develop in the new games can automatically be added as features in the older games as well, probably.
Yeah, sure. We actually do that. So if there's something now that we just created for the new games, we can just backport it to the other games that are currently running, which makes it quite a really smooth infrastructure now.
Yeah, it's an awesome benefit. And we talked about scaling, right? Because well, I know that your gamers are spread across the globe, and so scaling of your backend infrastructure is important. Could you give us a sense of the size and the volume of the requests that you're handling to run the games? I assume it's been an interesting puzzle to solve.
Yeah, so actually the funny thing about this is that there are a lot of variables that you have to make sure for. So as I said, so if you're getting a small feature from a platform that just pushes your installs to say 60,000 installs a day. So for our current game, I just looked for that is a player and the communication between the client and the server we already optimized and make sure that it is not too much, since especially on mobile you're dealing with a lot of different networks where the mobiles are in there, so you have a lot of latency stuff, and so you just want to make sure that you only sync the important things and not just do a lot of stuff because it just will just add up on the client side. Not usually on the server side. So we are having about 350 messages per user per day, which just sums up to I think about 20 million messages that's gone. The other thing is, if you are able globally, that means that not that the complete traffic is just distributing evenly through the day. So you usually have your peak times where just everyone is playing. So usually especially if you are available in the US, so it's more on the US time framing. So for Germany, it's just in the night, and also it's just the times like going to work, having or when you're having your mid breaks, or in the evening where people are playing mobile games. So it's not something like it is on console PC games where you just say afternoons or in the evenings where you just have time and just make sure that it's in there. It's more like through all the day where you are just having a little bit of spare time and you can just move to your phone and just play for 5 minutes.
Yeah. So it's both, let's say, high in volume, but also distributed among the day with some peaks and some low periods.
Yeah, especially with peaks.
Yeah. And some of the developers watching today may think, okay, so it's a complicated backend. We touched about cost benefits. Can we talk a little bit more about that, right? So what were you able to achieve moving from, let's say, your older infrastructure towards serverless?
Actually, I think it's actually not complicated. So there is maybe a little bit of struggle if you are just not familiar with how serverless is working and how the thing you have to do. But in the end, it's more easy because you're not just concentrating on your business logic and on your game logic and not about how you structure things in there. So you can just concentrate on that. And we actually save a lot of time with that, since in general, if you are just making games, the most time you actually should spend is for the game mechanic and how the game is on the client side. Still, you need some kind of that services in the backend to just make sure that everything runs smooth, and there's a communication maybe between players and some kind of backup in there. Also for as I said, for your support team to be able in there. However, this is just something that you actually already done since you're when you're implementing the client. And also, if you are designing a infrastructure where you can just reuse a lot of it, it also gets more easier since you have the same code and the same pattern, I would say, just distributed through all the games. So you just increase your speed with every game that you just do over time, and can just reuse a lot of things. And from that perspective, I would actually say it has made things really easy for us, and it will get easier in the future, actually.
Yeah.
That's actually for the next game, but we are just planning. So it will be, I think, released early next year. We actually did nothing on the back end, and we're just reusing the old one.
Awesome.
Since
So
it's just anything what we have, it's just having setting it up one time, and that's it. And actually, also one cool thing about AWS that I just wanted to mention is that also deployment. Well, you can click everything if you want on the web interface, but we are just actually developed our scripts during that time. So actually, just running up or setting up a new environment for a new game is just a thing about 10 minutes, 15 minutes now, and it just runs.
But then you probably have, let's say, the whole setup as infrastructure as a code, because otherwise you would not be able to do that.
Yeah, that's it. But it's also some of things. So also, if you are adding new infrastructure or something like that, that's also fastening actually how fast you can deploy the code.
Yeah. And if you think about, not sure if you could quantify, but in terms of cost, right? Have you ever looked at how much you were able to save, and maybe also explain how it went up, right? Because you've got the initial phase and you're building, but let's say the game's maybe not be live yet, or it's just slowing, increasing in player. Anything you could share with us?
Yes. So actually, I on preparation to this call, I just looked for that. However, since it was in the beginning of ColdFire, since we started back then to moving to serverless, I have no real numbers about that. So, but however, the feeling is about we actually just having the infrastructure and the cost from human resource for the one who just taking care about that. I think it was about slightly over 50%, or it just got half. Back then, so that was actually the reason where I just said, okay, it's worth any minute that I have to invest to move to that new platform, and to service to just make sure that this is running really well. The other thing about that is, so actually we published 4 games. However, 1 game has been removed off the store. The first game that was on the old stack that we had. And well, the love for games that you have live is there where you're just launching with them, then it's just ramping up, maybe gaining some speed, and over the time it just goes down and then stabilizes at a specific amount. For the first game that we have on our on-premise base, it was like, okay, it's not on the profitable side now because you are still having all the server costs being in there. With the new games of serverless, it's actually as you just pay for what you use. We're still operating also 1 game that has actually a really low volume on the users on there. However, as we are just paying per user that is using it, it is still profitable for us. So having really low server costs, or actually being your server costs actually adopt now how many users you have. So this is also something that, especially for mobile marketing, if you are doing some kind of performance marketing, is also that you make sure that if you are running big campaigns that just push a lot of users onto your servers, you have to make sure that you have enough capacity in there. So you're not just wasting money for marketing and then having users that are not able to connect. And this is actually problems that we actually do not have.
Yeah.
And I know
Yeah,
these
so
are problems back from the companies I worked beforehand.
Yeah, I can imagine, right? So you have another less thing to worry about, and that is about, let's say, the underutilization you're still paying for to be able to capture that peak if your game hits up. So yeah, that's a nice benefit.
Yeah, it's also one thing, and the good thing is now with having all that, we have just more time to concentrate on our games.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the most important thing, right? So not think about the undifferentiated heavy lifting of the infrastructure, but on, let's say, the experience and the features you can push towards the gamers.
Yeah.
So we're going to hear from Arnie in the session immediately after this one, and he's going to dive deeper into the tech and talk about various serverless use cases. But as someone who's been through it all, what advice would you give to the developers in the audience about how they should be thinking about their backend?
Well, actually, as I said, the backend is also important for having a game. So like as I said, it's still also for a single player game, some infrastructure that you need in there. It's like having the support and making sure that everything is running smooth in there and having safe backups of the save games from your players to make sure that they are having a really good experience. The thing about that is that you do not have to think or I think you should not think of the backend as that infrastructure part, but more on what it is doing. And for us, it's just doing that. So if we need some new service in there, we're just implementing it as a microservice in there and having it available for all our games then. And we are reusing a lot of services that has actually also been proven to be important for our games. And the good thing about our current solution is that we can concentrate really on what it's doing and not how we have to set it up.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's awesome advice for everyone viewing today.
Yeah, and actually for small companies like us, so having just 8 people and actually having just 2 coders, it's just right for us. So we are still able to do all the stuff that we have to need or what we need to do without spending too much time on that.
Yeah, so I think you've got it covered, right? You've got your highly scalable backend, high availability built-in. What's next in terms of projects? Any cool games you are working on? Other experiments you're running?
Yeah, so we are actually creating our next idle game, probably to launch early next year. So we are just getting ready for the first alpha tests on that side. But however, one interesting thing is also what we are maybe stepping our toe into it in the next time would be some kind of the machine learning that AWS is offering to also have a little bit better of analysis and of our data that we have from the BI side, since there's also some really important stuff that mobile games have to do. Since it's iterating that fast and the mobile market is growing that fast, you just have to make sure that everything you do has also an effect. Yeah, so I'm kind of looking forward of that.
Cool. Well, to be honest, me as well. We will be working together probably in the next projects as well. So again, thanks, Jem, for joining us today. And let's hand it back over to Arnie. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me here.